But first, as all of you who watch the show regularly would know, politics, as I often say, is a contest. And you can't win a contest unless you have a clear and strong alternative. Last night I made the point that Susan Lee's Federal Liberals can't move on from the Jacinta Price saga, in part because when you have no strong position of your own on immigration, when your policy's up in the air and under review for months and months on end on everything, it's hard to change the subject from personalities to policies. If you don't have any policies, there's nowhere to go. Well, the same's true with Liberals in Victoria. Despite the fact that the Allan Labor government's the worst in living memory, pretty stiff competition out there, it is a broken state. The Melbourne CBD is a ghost town because of working from home. It's grotty, shops are closed, it's not safe. The once beautiful wide streets of Melbourne are choked with bike lanes or closed with endless construction. Not to mention the drug use and rough sleepers on almost every corner. Statewide, people have fled the capital. People and their money are leaving, businesses are leaving as well because of Labor's high taxes, and more of that's to come. Crime, as you know, it's out of control. You see the headlines, the home invasions, the carjackings, and of course the deaths. All out of control because of politically correct policing policy that leaves the poor old uniformed officers trying to do their job with one arm tied behind their back. And don't even get me started on the judiciary with their revolving door on bail decisions, which now even senior police are willing to publicly raise as an issue. But as bad as all that is, and it's horrific if you live in Melbourne, if the polls are to be believed, this appalling government's odds on to be returned. And don't think that won't happen. After all, this is a state that gave Daniel Andrews another term even after he'd locked them up for 2 years. And yes, the brutal campaigning politics of Labor plays a role here. They are good at the negative campaign. So too the strength of the state's militant unions. But let's be honest, a weak opposition's also a big part of the problem. Now, as decent as Brad Batten is, the Victorian Liberals need a kick up the backside. You see, at election time, voters don't just ask one question, they ask two. First, they ask, does the government deserve to be re-elected? Now, if that answer's a no, there's then a second question. Is the opposition ready to govern? Now, voters have to be satisfied on both counts to change the government. Back to the last election, did Andrews need to go? Absolutely. Was the Matthew Guy Liberals, were they ready to lead? No. That was the voters' conclusion. And you see, this is where the Victorian Liberal Party has not just let itself down, but it's consistently betrayed the people of Victoria by failing to be a credible alternative government, not just an opposition, but an alternative government. Now, it's not just the John Pizzuto disaster, the leader who self-immolated because he wasn't man enough to apologise after he wrongly accused a colleague of being linked to neo-Nazis. It's much more the fact that the Liberals will criticise the government but almost never come up with a clear position of their own because they're internally divided, terrified of making decisions, frightened of criticism, or just bone lazy. Probably a bit of all of the above. Now, I'm sorry, that's the truth. There's a pattern of behaviour here and it cannot be ignored. And maybe by calling it out, we can get the change that Victorians, Australians, are so desperate to see. Now, take the issue of Labor's new treaty with Aboriginal Victorians. Last night on this program, the Victorian leader, Brad Batten, quite rightly criticised state Labor's move to create much the same state-based Indigenous voice that Victorian voters so clearly rejected at a federal level.
We are definitely opposing this legislation, and Peter, I know that your listeners are well and truly aware of that, and we'll be working through. There's got to be an alternative to close the gap here in Victoria without a treaty and without a voice that the Victorians didn't commit to.
Great, but Brad, how can you credibly oppose something that's bad in principle and contrary to what the people want without pledging to reverse it should you form government? Now, when I put this to Brad Batten last night, here was his initial response. Give me an answer on the question of whether you would repeal it if it passes the Parliament.
Yeah. As I said, Peter, and I only can say we will have an alternative in there. That is the best way to describe. We'll have an alternative that says what can we do to ensure we're delivering the outcomes for Aboriginal people here in Victoria.
Well, eventually we got this.
So to have the alternative, my instinct would be that it wouldn't be there in the future.
As I said, Batten's a decent man, the best leader the Liberals have. And it's good that his instinct is to repeal the voice, but the public are entitled to know what his commitment is. Now, why is it so hard for the Victorian Liberals to make a definitive commitment on anything? Here's another example. Yesterday, to his credit, Batten pressed the government on knife crime in the Parliament, was thrown out for his trouble. This morning, though, he called into a Melbourne radio station, 3AW, to explain what he'd do should he become Premier in the wake of those deadly machete attacks over the weekend and the brutal slaying of 2 innocent kids. Now, specifically, Batten was asked about Jack's Law, so named in honour of Jack Beasley, the Queensland teenager stabbed to death in 2019, whose parents have since been campaigning for greater police powers across the country. In Queensland, that law's in place, in New South Wales too, and allowed police in crime hotspots to randomly approach people and use one of those metal detector wands to check if they're carrying a knife. Indeed, in the first 9 months of Jack's Law in New South Wales, police have reportedly scanned some 20,000 individuals. They've seized some 207 weapons, and that's led to 105 charges. So it's a no-brainer. And even though Jack's dad, Brett, had been on that radio station, 3AW, the day before, and even though Batten admits he's been speaking with the dad, Brett, when asked would he, if he was the Premier, introduce Jack's Law in Victoria, he couldn't give a straight answer.
I can't make that commitment today, but what I can say to you, Ross and Russ, is I am meeting again with Brett. We want to make sure that if the legislation is all in place, but we have the absolute goal. The government have decided to put machete bins out, hoping crooks bring knives to bins. We will make sure police have powers to go out and take them off the street. That will be our commitment, yes.
What's causing you to hesitate implementing what is an extraordinarily popular, with the public, a very popular plan?
Because it'd be disingenuous for me to come out and talk about exactly what we're doing before I've gone through this with Brett finally.
Now, come on. What's the point of talking to someone like Brett Beasley if you still can't make up your mind about a measure that would so obviously help, we see it in New South Wales and Queensland, stop violent crime? Yes, you're a good bloke, Brad Batten, you're a former cop, you get it. But you and your party have got to stop hiding behind this line of internal processes. Yes, have those processes. They're important, I absolutely get that, but speed them up. Work weekends if you have to. Stop your shadow ministers from taking all these overseas holidays. Put them to work. Because the only job you've got in opposition is to do the hard work to get out of it and into government. And clearly, not enough is being done fast enough. Here's another example. In country Victoria, apart from Labor's crazy renewables push, the biggest issue is the emergency services levy. You know, farmers paying more for the firefighting services they provide anyway as volunteers. Now, a fortnight before that monster rally on the steps of Parliament House, Brad Batten was on my show saying that he would oppose the levy. All right, let's be really, really clear then to voters tonight. Where do you stand on this levy?
Our priority right at the moment, Peter, is we do not support this levy. Our goal is to make sure it does not go through this Thursday.
Good. But again, what he wouldn't do, was tell me what he would do in government should he get there.
If the government gets the numbers and the Greens or the Animal Justice Party or any of those other minor parties fold or give up something else and sell out farmers, we will then go and meet with the farmers and find the best way forward so we've got a fairer tax system.
Now, as it happened on this issue, on the day, his team finally announced that they would not only oppose the levy, they would repeal it. But that's only because he was forced to front up to the rally and he knew he wouldn't get out of there alive if he stayed sitting on the fence. Now, please, this is politics 101. You cannot be a credible alternative Premier or Prime Minister, Susan Lee, if you can't specifically say in concrete terms what would be different and better under your government. And you have got to be able to do that when the issue's front and centre, in the headlines, in the minds of voters, and people are looking to you for answers. Now, as I've said, I think Brad Batten's the best alternative Premier the state's got, but he's got to have more definitive answers to at least some of the hard questions that are facing the people of Victoria if he's to save the state from the worst government in our history, because right now he's got to move those polling numbers, or I hate to say it, Labor will get back.